Hey everyone, so I thought I would angle you this way since a tiny someone is napping. So I figured we could get to see the cuteness and talk about books. I think he is definitely in focus and not me, which is very fair. He's cuter anyway. Anyway, so I'm going to start with some stats. So in August, I read 26 books for a total of 8,150 pages, which is somehow a nice round number. I don't actually know how I managed that one. I read 10 manga / graphic novels, 11 physical books, and then 5 ebooks. 5 were from Broken Binding, 2 were special editions, 3 were subscription books, 2 were from Fairy Loot. 1 was a subscription, 1 was a special edition. 1 from Lit Haven Boutique, which is the first book that I've ever ordered from them, and it's just stunning. So it's its own special edition. I had 13 from Barnes & Noble, 4 from KU, and 1 from Amazon, which was one of the other ebooks. So we're going to go mostly in the order of how I read them. So the first one is The Game Changer by Lana Ferguson. This is the same author as Fake Mate. And we follow Delilah, who is a baker on a local network show that has kind of lagging ratings. If you hear the door opening and closing, it's my husband going in and out. We're doing a house project over the long weekend. So this follows Delilah and Ian, who is the famous hockey player for the Boston team. It's not the Bruins, it's like the Druids or something like that. Some fake name. He is her older brother's best friend, and he is coming back to Boston to finish his hockey career after being away for like 6 years. She had a huge crush on him when they were younger, but he always saw her as his like friend's kid sister. And she has the idea to ask a hockey player to come on her show for an episode to do some cross promotion, and like he agrees. She didn't really specify that he had to be the one. He went through divorce 6 years ago, and like the press surrounding it was really bad. Now that he's back in town, and he just attended his ex's wedding to her new wife, people are speculating that he's trying to get her back. And so the idea is to get him on to this baking show for good press. The show airs, and there's a ton of talk about whether they're dating or not, how cute they were together, and both PR teams say they should just not say that they're not dating, not refute the rumors, and then try and have them be seen out in public. And the main issue is that his dad is just a giant dick. Ian and Delilah band together to solve their problems. There was no third act breakup, which I really like. And like once feelings became real on both sides, they had a discussion about it like adults and talked about their relationship not being fake anymore, which was really nice. Like a nice change for once. I do think I liked Fake Mate a little bit better, but this was super fun, and I could see this being a series, or at least having a second or third one. And I would definitely read both from that series if it ever becomes a series, and from the author again. I do think she has another paranormal romance coming out that's set near Loch Ness that I would be down to pick up. See what happens with that. You can't see let me just show you the stack. Like, this is the stack. Like, it's a mess. It's a huge stack. The next book I have to talk about is This Spells Love by Kate Robb. This is the Fairy Loot, like special edition from Fairy Loot. It's got little little edges, and then there's this like foiled hardcover, and like a cute little reverse dust jacket. And guess who I have? I have a noodle. So this follows Gemma, who gets dumped by her super lame boyfriend, and then she makes a wish that she had never met him or been in a relationship with him, and basically wakes up in an alternate reality where her best friend Dax doesn't know who she is, and now there aren't years of friendship in the way of them getting together, like realizing an attraction for each other in this reality. So there are a lot of things in her alternate life that are different in a really positive way for her, but she slowly realizes she has to figure out a way to get back to her original reality. The only thing that didn't totally make sense was how events played out in her original timeline while she was like gone. Because it was like she did like the same ritual to like get back to her timeline and like wakes up, but like there had been several changes made, and like her family was like, yeah, you just did this a couple weeks ago, like when she was still in her like alternate reality. So that wasn't explained super clearly. And so it's like, did she like swap with herself, or, like what happened? It was cute. I don't know that it's going to go down as like a favorite of the year, but it was a fun time. I'd read from the author again. It kind of gave me similar vibes to like 13 going on 30, or like, what was that early 2000s Angelina Jolie movie where she has the perfect life and like something happens to make her look at things differently. Life or Something Like It. That one. It's kind of like that. And then there was like the ritual involved, like the, prior to the ritual there were margaritas. Kind of reminded me of like midnight margaritas from Practical Magic, but then also like bonus points because there's actually a margarita recipe at the back of the book. So yeah, I'd have to just flag that and set that aside for later. So the next book I read is The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. This is labeled as a cozy fantasy / romantasy, but there are actually some really high stakes. I think publishing is using the label of cozy as a way to denote that, like, even if there are high stakes moments in the book, the outcome will go in a positive direction and not like just go completely sideways, like without it necessarily being like truly cozy. So this book is mainly cozy or cozy adjacent, but the catalyst to the story is actually the main character, Keela, fleeing a revolution and returning to her home island. It starts with her and her sentient spider plant named Kaz gathering as many books as they possibly can in the final crate that they have left to pack on their escape ship, while revolutionaries are burning down the library around them. They're able to flee with 5 crates of books and land on her home island of Kaltri. She grew up there with her parents before they left as a family for the capital city, where they've lived ever since. Her parents died from some sort of disease or illness prior to the start of the revolution, so she and Kaz are alone in the world except for each other. She returns to Kaltri and their old home and starts trying to recreate a life there. At first, she's really standoffish and scared because she can't let anyone know about the books that she brought with her, since they're spell books, and the Emperor has had a chokehold on magic, and anyone found performing illicit magic or illicit spells or being in possession of these books is sentenced really harshly. So she's really sensitive about people in her space, mainly because she doesn't want anyone finding the books that she rescued from the fire and reporting her. However, when she goes into town, she sees that things are a little different than what she remembers. Historically, sorcerers would come to the outer islands and use their magic to replenish the land and seas and calm the magic storms that are caused by an imbalance of magic. But the sorcerers haven't been coming to Kaltree in recent years, and the island is struggling because of it. As Keela tries to figure out how to make a living and help her home thrive again, she experiments with magic from her spell books. She also begins making jam to sell for trade as like a front for selling remedies to people who need replenishing their trees and gardens around the island. There are also flying cats on the island and a herd of mer horses that just make the place feel so magical and vibrant. As she helps the islanders, they welcome her back into their ranks, and she begins to find a community she can thrive in. There are a few things that pop up on the way to like a happy ending or like a stable, safe home that again aren't low stakes. Like if she gets caught, she's gonna die or be imprisoned and taken away. But with the cozy label, you know that that's not going to happen. And like I said, there's a lot of cozy elements like jam and spells and a cottage with a garden and winged cats and books and libraries and like a talking plant, and there's tea and pastries and just this really whimsical island with multiple races of beings. There are a lot of elements that make this cozy, but the stakes like are pretty high for her in particular. But I think when you have the label of cozy, like you know that things aren't going to go super sideways or super haywire. So I feel like it's a way to designate like this is going to have a happy ending, whether the stakes are high or not. I don't know if this is a standalone or the start of a series. I do suspect it's a standalone, but it was, yet another enjoyable read from Sarah Beth Durst. I've read another one of her standalones and really, really enjoyed it. And I listened to that one on audio, and it was really well done. And then this is the cover, and that's the sleeping cat, the winged cat, and they're so cute. Like, that's her little cottage. The next book that I read, oh my god, is The Crimson Moth, which I think maybe in the US is called The Heartless Hunter. This is the UK edition. Like I think this was an adult, like very adult subscription. Maybe it was the YA. Anyway, it's very pretty. Sorry for the light. I have a candle right behind the camera, and I think it's making everything kind of closer to the camera a little yellow. Yeah, it has like a book one. That's really nice. And then this is the reverse dust jacket. And then this is the back. But then these are the end papers that are nice and foiled. Fun character art. So this is by Kristen Ciccarelli. I hope I'm saying that right. This is set in a world where witches used to rule, but were overthrown after abusing their power. This led to people hunting down and killing witches, even ones who had nothing to do with the 3 witch queens that were in power. Rune's grandmother, not by blood, was a witch, and as she and Rune were about to escape, someone found out their plan and laid a trap for them. So Rune's grandmother forced her to turn her in so Rune would be spared, with the logic that, like, oh, she hated witches so much that she turned in her own grandmother kind of thing. 2 years later, Rune has developed the persona of a socialite who is only focused on parties and fancy gowns, but she is secretly the Crimson Moth, a witch who goes around freeing other witches that have been captured by the witch hunters. The main story starts with Rune discovering that the witch hunters have her grandmother's best friend, who she has been looking for like ever since her grandmother died. And she has to figure out where the witch hunters have taken her. And in order to do that, she has to get close to Gideon, who is the head inquisitor or witch hunter, and he helped take down the witch queens with his brother, who is conveniently Rune's best friend. Gideon has his suspicions about Rune being the Crimson Moth, but has never been able to get any proof, so he decides to get close to her in order to find that proof. Despite both of them working with hidden motives, their attraction to each other is very real. And of course, events ensue that bring things to a head, and secrets on both sides are revealed. There's not a cliffhanger in the sense that you don't know whether someone lives or dies. You're not oh, what's happened, but the action ends really quickly after some major events go down, or the book ends after some major events go down. You haven't seen the fallout of that, so I suspect that's what we're getting in book 2. I think it comes out in a few months. I can't remember if it comes out end of this year or early 2025, but I'm really excited for it. Another aspect of the book is that all the magic is blood magic, and using your own blood leaves silvery markings on the skin, and that's how witches have been revealed in the past by the witch hunters. Rune doesn't have any markings because she uses period blood, which I thought was really interesting. I could definitely see how that would give someone the ick, so be forewarned. I think this might be one of my favorites of the year. It reminded me a little bit of Serpent and Dove with less religious overtones, but I do love a witch hunter kind of book. So I had a really great time. It was written well. The next book is a KU book. It's Caught Up by Liz Tomford, which is book 3 in the Windy City series. This one follows Kai and Miller. Kai, we've seen Kai in, I think, maybe the second book. He is a professional baseball player and a single dad. His son is a product of a one-night stand, and Kai had no idea he even existed until he was 6 months old and his mom dropped him off. The team has been really supportive with letting him travel with his son and has helped with finding nannies to watch during games, but Kai keeps firing them left and right. Miller is a professional pastry chef whose job is to go around to different restaurants and tweak their dessert menus as they try to get Michelin stars and other awards. She had just started at a new restaurant but gets harassed on the job and is I'm out. And fortunately, the head chef saw the whole thing go down and is very understanding. So he's yeah, okay, I'm really sorry. Bye, I guess. She now has 3 months to get to her next gig, and her dad, his name's Monty, and he is the field manager of the team, convinces her to come hang out with him on the road and help out as Max's nanny. He also convinces Kai to accept her help because he has fired one too many nannies and can't fire this one. Max really quickly becomes attached to Miller and so does Kai. Miller and Kai are also both dealing with changing priorities and desires in their careers, which cause some conflict in them getting together and just in their personal lives in general. There's also a parallel between Kai and Max and Monty and Miller, because Monty adopted Miller after her mom passed away. He and Miller's mom had been dating for about a year when she was diagnosed with cancer, and after she passed away, he quit his playing career and took a coaching job at a small college before he landed his current job with like the major league team in Chicago. Because of this, Miller has like a huge amount of guilt about taking him away from his dream job, and thinks that as long as she makes a name for herself, like he'll be proud of her and think that like he didn't waste, like him losing his dream job wasn't a waste because she is so successful, kind of thing. And like, of course he doesn't feel that way, but she doesn't really know that yet. This is by far my favorite in the series. I'm like actually considering buying a copy to have. There is a scene with Monty and Miller that like got me. It's just such an incredible portrayal of like a father-daughter relationship, and it just, yeah. I really like the way that this explored how changing desires and circumstances around your career isn't the end of the world. It's just, we just have to figure out how we change our path from what we thought we wanted to what we currently want out of life, and try to figure out what that looks like instead of what we thought we wanted, and that it's okay for things like that to change. It was fantastic. The next three are not necessarily in order for how I read them through the month, but they're part of the same series. So we're going to talk about all three of them together, because that made more sense than trying to separate them. Northern Wrath is the first book in the Hanged Gods trilogy. This is Norse historical fantasy set at the cusp of Christianity slowly taking over in Scandinavia. This was my first book for my Broken Binding subscription, and I generally like Norse fantasy. This was definitely a little bit more historical, at least for the first book, and the author did a really incredible job of weaving daily life, like of Vikings, I guess we'll call them, into the fabric of the story, which was my favorite part in the series, like favorite thing about the series as a whole. This follows villagers from Ash Hill after it has been raided and the paths they take towards retribution. It's multi-POV, and there are bits of lore and myth woven into the story. We are also tangentially aware of historical figures that keep us grounded in time a little bit. So one of the POV characters that is slightly more of a side character, a character in her point of view, so like a side character to a side character, is like Harold Fairhair, if you know who that is. And then his son later is like Sven Forkbeard. So you kind of recognize names, or no, he's Harold Bluetooth. I don't think those were the same person. It's been a really long time since I've gone through like the kings and stuff. But yeah, so he's like the king of the Danes. So like that kind of keeps you grounded in time a little bit if you are at all familiar with like Norse history or anything. There is also like the race to prevent Ragnarok as like the overarching plot throughout the whole series. I don't think it's a new favorite, but it was very well done. Like the writing was really, really good. I have a whole video of, I think I did unboxings for all three books, and then I go into like really detailed stuff about all three books and like my thoughts about them. That's not coming out soon because I keep filming things and Damien is slowly going through them. So it'll be out eventually. The next book is Shackled Fates, which is the second book in the trilogy. This one is way less historical and much more fantastical. Well, this one's about 50-50. This takes place mainly in Asgard and the other 9 realms, not in Midgard or on Earth. Like it's like half historical, half like Asgard fantastical, like realms of the gods kind of thing. I think this one was my favorite in the series. It's between this one and the first one probably, just because they had like the historical, like daily life aspects. We do start to see the lead up to the final battle of Ragnarok and like getting people kind of in various places and positions. And we see how each individual impacts the likelihood of success or failure for the gods, I guess. So the third book in the series is called Slaughtered Gods. And we get the final preparations and then the final battle of Ragnarok in this last book. I do think that like overall you are fairly detached from the characters. It's pretty fair, it's pretty common, I feel like, in any sort of like myth retelling. And this is definitely a myth retelling of Ragnarok, which if you know anything about Ragnarok, like everyone dies except for like 10 people. When you go in knowing that, I feel like the author either has to try really, really hard to make you like so invested in the characters or kind of keep you at arm's length. And that's what this author did, which kind of given the nature of the story and like the focus, I feel like was a little bit more on like world building and plot than characters anyway, makes sense. I do think that I would have been way more upset with how things ended for some characters if I had felt a little more attached to them. If someone tried to argue with me that this was grimdark, I would not be I would not believe them. I don't know if you can see a noodle. That is an Albert. Hugh is napping. So the next book that I read, Spy Family, Volume 12. This was so good. It had a little bit of everything going on. So like a little bit of Anya at school, a little bit of Yor with her friends at work, a little bit of, I don't know if I would say filler, but like a little bit of like slice of life type stuff that we've gotten in the past and maybe not necessarily recently. But it ends with Lloyd on a mission and kind of ends on a cliffhanger. So I'm really excited for volume 13 whenever it comes out. I need to check on that. It's still just fantastic. The next one is another ebook, another KU book. This one is Play Along, which is the 4th book in the Windy City series by Liz Tomford. This one follows Isaiah, who is Kai's brother, and Kennedy, who is one of the, maybe not personal trainers, but like, we'll call her personal trainer, but like highly qualified. She's one of the like sports therapists on the team. They get married in Vegas. She was on a bachelorette trip with her stepsister, who is getting married to her ex-fiance. And he is on a team bonding trip like right before the start of the season. And they get drunk together and go get married. So someone finds out and tells the like manager, owner of the team, and they were going to fire Kennedy for being in a relationship with one of the players. But Isaiah stands up for her and says that it's not a problem for married couples to be employed by the team, only if like they were dating. And he, like brings up an example of like, oh, this other couple, this husband and wife couple were both employed by the team. So like we're married. So like what's the problem? We also get to see how they met the first time several years earlier. I think 3 years earlier. And we see that Kennedy had been accepted as a doctor for the team. But once the head doctor realized that she was a woman, he lowered the offer to like a more entry level position that she's in. And Isaiah heard them arguing about it and offered to go to management, but she stopped him. There's a whole lot more to this book, but I liked this one almost as much as Caught Up and just had a ton of fun. If you like a he falls first kind of vibe, this is it. The third and fourth books in the series have been like the major highlights for me. Book 5 is going to be Rio, who is one of the hockey players that we meet in the first book, and then he is also best friends with Indy from the second book. And like all he's wanted is to find a wife or a girlfriend, basically like a partner. He's just so sad that he's like the last one left. But I think that one comes out next year, so I have to wait for it, which is kind of sad. I don't know that I would necessarily reread the first two, but the third and fourth one, I'm like, I might actually have to order a copy because they were so good and so fun. The next book is A Werewolf's Guide to Seducing a Vampire. This is the third and final book in the Glimmer Falls trilogy. This one follows Ben, who is a werewolf, and he runs the plant store in town. I think a couple other businesses, and he's like in the process of expanding the store into another like venue type space. We start off at the wedding of Oz and Mariel from book 1, and like where Ben is kind of lamenting how awkward he feels on dates. And he goes home and drunkenly orders an enchanted crystal off of eBay for 99 cents. And this rock contains Eleonora, who is a vampire succubus who has been attached to it for centuries. And she comes out of the crystal pissed off as hell. And Ben kind of has no idea what to do with her. Like, she's just like, you're an angry lady, and I am a very respectful man, so I have no idea what to do with you. So as he introduces her to modern life, like the last time she was out of the crystal was like in the 1960s, they realize they can have a mutually beneficial relationship. Like once he realizes that she is attached to the crystal in this way and like basically has to do what he says as the owner of the crystal, they try to end the enchantment. It was a super fun final installment to the series. I could totally see there being more in the future, but I don't know if the author has any planned. Then I picked up a book called Kilt Trip, which is also another ebook. I got this for like $1.99 on Amazon because I think it was super on sale. And it follows a woman who goes around the world consulting with struggling tour companies to help them boost their bookings and increase revenue. She gets sent to Scotland to evaluate a family-run tour business. And before showing up to their meeting, she goes on a tour under a fake name and hits it off with her tour guide, who is in fact the son of the owner and is like mostly in charge, but is also going to officially take over after his father retires. He is understandably pretty peeved that she did that, but he encourages her to go on some of their tours before she makes up her mind about like changes to suggest. She's really hesitant to do that because Scotland is like her last connection to her mother, who has passed away several years ago, like in the like 10-year range. And she doesn't want to like go to these places and have them be underwhelming and like lose that kind of magical connection that she has with these places, and her mom is like the last places that she'll find a connection to her. She also keeps getting conflicting directions about the recommendations she needs to make from her boss. And the recommendations that her boss wants her to make don't really align with the direction that like the client wants to go in, like wants to take their business in. So there's like tension around that. If you've ever dreamt about moving abroad and meeting like a hot Scotsman or dating a local, then you will probably enjoy this one. It was a fun time. It was cute. The next book is also a KU book, or well, an ebook. This one is a KU book. It's called The Wolf King. This is yet another Mimo Reads Janessa recommendation. This is a wolf shifter romance where she is the princess of a kingdom that is at war with the wolf kingdom. She is set to marry this heinous man that her father needs an alliance with for the good of the kingdom. And this man has a fighting ring in his castle where he pits captured wolves against each other. I think it's like the night before, a night or two before they're supposed to get married. And so like she and her father are there, and like he's like brought them there for entertainment. And he pits like an alpha against a smaller wolf. And she steps in and stops them after her husband to be tells the alpha to kill the smaller one. Her fiance says some like really nasty things to her and sends her up to her room, because she can't handle it. But she sneaks down to the dungeon where they keep the wolves to tend to the injured one, and like also talks to the alpha while she's down there. Later that night, she's woken up by the castle coming under attack, and the alpha stops other wolves from assaulting her, but then also turns around and kidnaps her. She doesn't totally mind since her fiance is awful and her father just sees her as a bargaining chip, so he doesn't really care about her if she can't be useful. I thought the world building, lore, and history of the kingdoms was an interesting take on like a familiar story. There were a couple things that I didn't love, and one of those was the idea of like a caller designating her as the alphas when they arrived at the castle, even though it was for her protection, like because like they could smell that she was a woman and would like harm her if they didn't know that she was like under his protection, and, like as like a visual, like it was like a visual reminder or statement that she was under his protection, but it also has like a history of kind of proprietary type connotations. I don't think it would have bothered me as much if he hadn't told her that she either had to wear it or stay in her room. I think it could have been handled differently, and I wouldn't have. I would have been like, okay, like that's fine. There was also another wolf that was like half wolf, half human that helped her a few times. He's seen as very politically savvy, but also dangerous and like more of a threat to other wolves, like for other wolves to take note of than the man that she's with. He helps her a few times, but she doesn't really know why he's helping her. And I can't tell if he's going to end up being her long lost sibling or if it's going to turn into like a reverse harem based on things that happen at the end of the book. So I will very trepidatiously end up reading the second book to see how things go, and partly to get some answers, but partly to see more of this hybrid wolf and his machinations. I think it depends. I think it came out fairly recently, so if the sequel comes out in like a year and I like don't remember to look into it, we may or may not have forgotten by then. So we'll see. The next two books are also kind of together. The first book is Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. This is a Broken Binding special edition. This is kind of like Aragon for adults, but better. This is set in a world that had a dragon guard, but they fell to the Empire 400 years ago, and dragons haven't really been seen since then, other than the ones under the Empire's control. Kaelin, Dan, and Rist are from the Glade, and the story starts with their life in the village, including like a story night at the pub that tells the tale of the fall of the Dragon Guard. There's a multi-village tradition that marks the transition from boyhood to manhood that they participate in. And then it's just like them being like awkward around girls and like dealing with other family stuff. And after the Proving, which is this multi-village tradition, they're sent on an errand to a neighboring village where they meet a man named Eric who is traveling with his father and brother. Kaelin sees Eric leave his cloak in the tavern and takes it out to him and walks right into an altercation between Eric and the Imperial Guards. Kaelin defends Eric and gets himself, Dan, and Rist swept up in their conflict. Aeson, who is Eric's father, convinces the three of them to continue traveling with them, and they agree. Aeson and his sons are clearly on a mission, and after several intermediary events, he reveals that they are in possession of a dragon egg and are taking it to a city. I can't remember if it's a city or a kingdom that has never fallen to the Empire. This story feels really familiar and definitely has nods to classic fantasy, but it's really well done. I did feel like I didn't get quite enough from the characters, but I do think this is the author's debut novel, so I'm sure that will change through the course of the series. Also, you learn about the dragon towards like the halfway point of the book, and then you get the actual dragon around the 60% mark. I really liked the way that the author did that because it feels like the characters know what's at stake before a dragon is introduced to the mix and are like already invested in things that are happening. It's just a different take of like, oh my god, I found an egg and have a dragon. Oh my god, things are dangerous because of all this other stuff that I never even knew about. So it's like a kind of reverse on that, where they like know what's at stake and what the risks are and things. But yeah, I got my copy from the Broken Binding, and it was one of my impulse purchases at the end of last year, since it was one that I hadn't read before. I bought, and I got it anyway after reading the blurb. I actually got one that's like slightly damaged, but it's just like a scuff on some of the gilded edges, but it's like really not bad. I have zero regrets about it. The series does go like novel, novella. I think he's on the fourth book or fifth book, maybe. The rest of the series, I think, is on KU, so I will have to try and get that through KU to read it, because I don't know that I can wait for the other editions to come out. I do have the first novella, which is called The Fall. This is like the detailed events of the fall of the Dragon Guard, which is like the story we got in the first book, and the rise of the Empire around a mage called Fane Mortem and his blood magic, which is different from like the regular magic found in the world. There are 4 perspectives, and they are each so well done and bring so much more context to the story from the novel. I don't think reading order really matters in this case since the events take place 400 years prior, but it just adds so much more to the story. I don't usually like novellas and short stories, but this like might have changed my mind. Either that or like I could absolutely see novellas and short stories or like some of the secondary POVs were like 2 to 5 pages and they were really well done in the novel. And so like I could see that really being a strength of the authors, have like shorter media being his forte. I do think this is the best novella I've ever read, or one of them. Mind you, that's probably a pretty short list. And like the issues I was having with the writing in Of Blood and Fire were not present in this story. So like I felt more connected to the characters and that sort of thing. So I loved it. I thought it was great. So the next book that I read this month was Volume 5 of Demons of the Shadow Realm. This is by the same mangaka as Fullmetal Alchemist, and we follow twins that are rumored to be the ones who can sunder day and night. Yuru's isolated village was attacked, and he was forced to journey down the mountain in search of answers. Who attacked them, why they attacked them, all that kind of thing. It was revealed that his twin in the village was fake, and the real Asa had left the mountain with their parents years earlier. Yuru reunites with the real Asa and starts learning more about demons and the different clans. His clan's guardians, the Divine Right and Left, which were like the statues at the entrance to their village, see him as their master. Well, I think they made a pact and like he became their master. And he's able to like wield them and their abilities against other demon pairs and their masters. Demons always come in pairs and have a super wide variety of abilities, usually opposites, like left and right. And then like I think there's one person with a pair who like one opens, the other closes kind of thing. So it's really interesting. All the various clans have very different motives and end goals and that sort of thing. It's kind of a reverse isekai because instead of going to a fantasy world, Yuru comes to modern day Tokyo. I'm having a lot of fun with the series. And like, I don't know that you can go wrong with an Arakawa series, but like, I feel like it's still a little bit hard to like pin down exactly what this is about and like where it's going. But I'm along for the ride. Like I'm having a good time. The next volume that I read was Marriage Toxin Volume 3. Garo finishes up his second mission and attends the wedding of his best friend, who is the Bugmaster, with Kinosaki. They start a third mission at the end of the volume that like leads them into trouble. I have volumes 4 and 5 pre-ordered already. I'm definitely having a lot of fun. One thing I really like about this series is that it's done a really good job of explaining the premise really quickly, like right off the bat, and then like slowly expanding the world. So like in this one, we kind of see like Bugmaster and Garo's first meeting and kind of how the different families are connected and like the different relationships that they have or are supposed to have and that kind of thing. The next several volumes that I have are volumes 7 through 11 of A Man and His Cat. So I'll just go through and hold them up real quick. And yeah, these volumes are like if Carl and Ellie from Up had kids. Jamie and I watched Up again recently, and I was like, oh, this feels like, as I was reading these, of course, and I was like, oh man, these have really similar vibes, like at least these volumes in particular. because they do involve Kanda and like his kids show up. Oh, and then this is volume 11. Yeah, so I was like, oh, this would be like Up if Carl and Elliot had kids together. Kanda basically goes around helping cats and his friends, and they slowly bring him out of his grief little by little. I feel like the series is such a poignant look at life after grief and loss, but it also incorporates cute glimpses into life with cats and like our connections with our friends and loved ones. There's like several like slice of life moments and like other, like little comics of all like the quirks around cats and pet ownership and everything, and along with an overarching plot. Along the same lines, I also picked up A Man and His Cat picture book. It's A Man and His Cat picture book, Fukumaru and the Spaceship of Happiness. And Fukumaru, who is the cat from A Man and His Cat, basically like goes around helping like alien cats, like eating food and playing with toys and going to the stars and all that kind of thing. So it was quirky, it was cute, it was a fun time. Oh my gosh, we have a noodle over here. I'll show the important things. The next book that I read was Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation, the comic, volume 6. This is the comic / graphic novel based on the light novel of the same name. We follow Wei Wuxian after he is resurrected, and it's the story of his past and how he died the first time, and how that connects, like we look at how that connects to the present timeline. Volume 6 covers the rest of Coffin Town and then additional like wrap up scenes after the events of Coffin Town. I also just watched The Untamed on Netflix, which is the C-drama that is based off of these books. It actually follows things really like pretty accurately. Like some of the details, like the specific order of things aren't necessarily super exact, but in the novels and the comics, the timeline between past and present is a little bit broken up, but they did pretty much all of the past and then got back to the present, if that makes sense in the show. So, yeah, but it was beautifully done. So in China, any portrayals of non-heterosexual relationships are forbidden. So that aspect of the books and the light novels is not in there. So yeah, it's like very heavily hinted at in the show, just was never going to be explicitly shown. I have 2 more. The first one is In a Jam by Kate Canterbury. This was also on KU. We follow Shay after she is left at the altar and then discovers that her aunt left her farm with the stipulation that Shay has to be married within the year to keep the land. And so she obviously is like looking for a big change after being very unceremoniously left at the altar. She goes back to this small town in Rhode Island and runs into her old friend Noah, who had a huge crush on her back in high school. He is now the guardian for his niece, who is having some issues, like to the point where she's almost going to be held back for another year for like a second year of kindergarten. Shay offers to help tutor her over the summer to get her like up to speed and work on some of the behavioral issues she's dealing with since she's a kindergarten teacher. Um, and Noah agrees, but like kind of gives her the cold shoulder. Like any time that he's there, like avoids her, like avoids talking to her outside of, you know, vague pleasantries and dealing with his niece. But she finally gets him to open up a little bit more and like tell her more about his niece and how he got dragged back to town and all this kind of stuff. And then she tells him about the will, and he had gone off and become a lawyer before coming back to town. She tells him about the stipulation about of marriage, and he's like, that would get dismissed in court right away, like that's not allowed. And she's like, no, I'm gonna. So he like offers to write a motion against it, and he, when she says that like, no, I want to take the year to like figure out what to do with my life, he offers to marry her and is like, oh yeah, I really want the land, so we get married and everything. So, and like he's like super awkward about it, even though he's like still into her, which was kind of entertaining. You're just watching him like fumble the bag like so bad. And then he invites her to the first football game of the season and asks her, like, kind of really like impromptu, asks her to play his fake girlfriend in front of this really pushy divorcee that keeps hitting on him. And like her kids were really obnoxious to his niece last year. And he's like, no, your kids are tiny assholes. Like, why would I be around you? Like, why would I have her around them even more? Obviously, sparks fly between him and Shay, and like things progress from there. I enjoyed this for the most part, but it felt like there was a weird sort of distance between the reader and the characters. I don't know if it was like a little bit of like telling versus showing. I didn't love like the high school crush parts of this. Like it felt it like he resented her a lot for leaving and never looking back when that was like their plan that they had talked about all of high school. Even though she'd written him a note that said, "Oh, we should come back and show them like how much better off we are without them and how we've subverted their expectations, like really low expectations of us, and like take this place by storm during this like big like homecoming type event." And he took that seriously, but it was more of an offhand comment for her. And there was no like timeline. There wasn't like, oh, let's come back 5 years after high school and show them how much better we are. So he like resented her for this like really offhand comment and like a note that she left him at some point during high school. And it also almost felt like she had like forgotten that they were I don't not like in his mind it seemed like he thought she had like forgotten that they were friends and like just like didn't remember their history together or just like didn't care about their friendship any like ever. And like that wasn't ever the case. And he was still mad that she like dated people that were like all wrong for her in high school and all this kind of stuff. So like that part was just, it was really weird to me. And I don't know. He finally got over it and like realized that like, oh, like I've also changed a ton since high school. And like he had like a huge glow up where like your bodies change and things change, and like not everyone hits puberty at the same time, and like not everyone like grows into themselves at the same time. And he went off to college and like grew 6 inches, and you know his body weight redistributed accordingly, and like his skin cleared up, and all the things that like teenagers have issues with. And people still make comments like, oh, you're so attractive now that you're not like chubby anymore or whatever. And so like there is that kind of stuff, but like I don't know. And then he also kept thinking that she would like never be selfless enough to become a school teacher. Like the way that he thought about her felt really weird sometimes. Like especially more in like comparing high school her to like current day. It was just a really weird aspect. And like normally I'm like, oh yeah, okay, like been you've had a crush on her for a long time, like okay. And then it just was like weird. Like it felt almost like one of those like, oh, I can't believe you like didn't see me in high school. Like I, it was weird. It was weird. I think I would read another book by her, but if it had like similar issues, I don't know that I would continue with any others. So we'll see. That I know there's another one. I think it's called Shucked that takes place. I think it's in the same town. I might read that one, and then if it has similar issues, then just be like, okay, I'm good. But I'll probably pick that one up, next time I'm feeling like I need just a random KU romance. The last book that I read is called The Witch Collector by Sharisa Weeks. So this is my first purchase from Lit Haven Boutique, and this was kind of an impulse purchase, but I'd heard like incredible things about the book itself. And then there's like blue holographic edges. There's this stunning foiled cover and back cover with a quote. And then there is this like foiled map that goes across front and back covers of the hard case. There's this disgustingly beautiful end paper art and different back. And then there's this artwork of the two of them together, which I was like, oh my god, I'm sold. This was packaged so well. Every single book shipping service should do it the same way. Anyway, so this is called The Witch Collector. Witch Collector comes and takes witches for the Frost King from several different villages, and Raina vows to kidnap him and assassinate the Frost King this year, like to prevent any other witches from being taken, and partly to get revenge because her sister was taken several years ago. I think 6 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. There was a big age difference. I want to say that Raina's sister is like 5 or 6 years older than she is, and I think Raina herself is like 24, 25. So she has this plan in place, but on collecting day, her village is attacked, and she and the Witch Collector are forced to team up to go save the Frost King and the other witches that have been collected over the years and stop the attackers from reaching the Frost King. Along their journey, they learn more about Raina's abilities, face different attackers and threats, and learn more about each other's secrets and how the history of this world affects their like present day situation. Their attraction to each other also grows as they travel together, but there isn't a ton of spice. Like there's like one main scene and like a heavy petting kind of scene. but the relationship building and the plot outside of the romance are really well done and more of the main focus of the novel. And I feel like this is what really good fantasy romance looks like. You could describe this as slow burn, but it doesn't really feel like a slow burn, not at least not to me, just because there's a lot of other stuff going on. It feels way more realistic because they're like really busy trying to stop attackers from reaching the Frost King and just trying to survive because they're in this like enchanted forest, and the focus is on getting there and surviving and not getting hot and heavy. Yeah, so it's like way more realistic and like what an actual relationship, how an actual relationship might develop. It's slightly enemies to lovers since she was planning on kidnapping him, but more like mentally enemies in her mind to like a begrudging partnership to lovers kind of deal. Another thing I really liked about the book was that Raina was born voiceless. So she uses sign language to communicate, and Alexis, who is the witch collector, is friends with her sister, and she taught him how to sign over the last several years. And like her sister, Raina's sister, also told him about an ability that she has. So he was like planning on collecting her that trip anyway. But it turns out that Nefele, who is her sister, and Alexis are actually really good friends. That was really cool to see that kind of representation in a book. This was kind of another one that I purchased on a whim. I'm not mad about it at all. I really hope they do the rest of the series. I think they said that they were going to. I would have to look back through emails and like other social media kind of stuff to like actually have confirmed it. I really enjoyed it and I'm looking forward to it. Hope you guys had a wonderful reading month in August and have a fantastic September as well. I've read the most books this year in February so far at 28. And I was really close with this one. I thought about just like stopping, like not reading, not finishing this one, and like picking up some manga and just being like, let me get through this. But I didn't end up doing that because I was like, no, let me just finish this one and then I can plow through some other books this month. But I did, I think April or June or something was my like highest page count so far, but I did beat that. Yeah, so it was March. So in March, I had read 7,532 pages, and I surpassed that by over 600 pages this month. So I don't know that I will be beating the page count the rest of the year, and I know December is going to be wild. You know, like we're getting into like holiday season and fall and that sort of thing, but I am hoping I am really productive in like September, October, possibly November. We'll see how that goes. Yeah, I hope you guys have a really nice fall reading season, and I'll see you in the next one.